That concludes all the public speaking tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to move on to obviously the major item 4, the discussion of the local plan. And I'm now going to start this section with an introduction by Paul Wilson to update the report and perhaps address some of the issues already raised this evening. Paul.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Members will be aware from the report that at a special meeting of the Council in October of 2014, there was a resolution to withdraw the previous Darfshdales local plan following an examination in public which was conducted by an inspector appointed by the Secretary of State during the summer of 2014. Members took that decision on the basis that fundamentally the inspector who considered the plan last time round considered that the authority had not allocated sufficient land for housing, and members felt that it was only appropriate to revisit the whole issue afresh, looking at the evidence base in order to come back with a revised plan which stood better prospects of being successful at an examination the next time it was presented. Following the withdrawal of that plan, the Local Plan Advisory Committee have worked very hard and diligently looking through a whole raft of detailed evidence on a wide range of subjects, and the meetings of the Advisory Committee outlined at paragraph 1.5 give members a flavour of the amount of work which those members of the committee have actually put into this process to date, and I would like to congratulate those members who have gone through that particular work, because it's been very challenging and daunting during that period of time. Effectively, we are now at the stage whereby we are looking to bring forward a new local plan which will cover the period 2013 to 2033. Now, the overriding duty of the Planning Authority is to prepare a local plan which passes the tests of soundness. It's got to be a plan which is based on robust evidence, and it's got to be supportable on challenge during that examination in public on any particular aspect of that plan, be it housing numbers, be it demographics, be it employment, retailing, and it is the duty of the authority to make sure that it has the evidence to justify any decisions which have been taken to date in bringing that particular plan forward. The local plan is a policy document. It effectively sets the framework for the determination of planning applications up to 2033. And whilst there are a number of issues proposed in this plan, principally around housing, which clearly members of the public have expressed concerns about, fundamentally this local plan has got to be prepared following full public consultation. And subject to any resolution of the Council this evening, if indeed members endorse the plan to move forward to public consultation, there will be a period of 6 weeks commencing on the 7th of April to the 19th of May. Throughout that period, there will be a series of exhibitions throughout the district. There will be a series of public meetings which members of the public are free to attend and express any particular concerns that they have, in addition to those which have been expressed this evening. So this really isn't the end of the process. This is very much the start of a journey in terms of taking this plan forward. The public consultation process will inform any future revisions which need to be made to the plan, and then towards the autumn of this year we will seek to secure Council approval to submit a plan back to the Secretary of State in anticipation that that will be passed sound and we will ultimately secure an adopted local plan, which is everybody's intention. In terms of the work of the Advisory Committee, Chairman, there are a number of revisions which have been made following the meetings of the committee, and they are outlined at paragraph 2.5 of the report, and there is also an updating report presented for members' consideration this evening, and that relates to issues of sustainability appraisal and habitats regulation assessment, which are statutory requirements. And I would like to request members to consider the findings of that assessment in moving forward the local plan, and indeed the recommendations from that report need to be considered alongside the local plan as currently tabled, such that they can be incorporated into a draft plan ready for publication. Chairman, at this stage I'm very happy to take questions from members on any aspect of the plan, and in doing that I will respond to any particular issues raised by members of the public.
I'd like to take that during the debate, please. Can I just, before we move on, the lady and gentleman, we've got a couple of chairs there if you want to, because you could be here a long time. So do come and move them back to the, and because you look a bit like the wall looks a bit, just take a couple of chairs there. Lovely. Okay. Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I'm sure there'll be questions in and around the debate. I'd like to move now to Councillor Rose.
Well, Chairman, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Burgess. And I'd like to say, if only it was as easy as he suggests to solve the Derbyshire Dales problems. It's certainly a site we looked at very carefully, and the advice we got was that we'd have to start at a low number and build up. But I'm grateful to him for his contribution. As all the contributions have been put forward fairly and equitably, and the hard work that obviously goes into preparing those is much appreciated. Now, all members, I'm sure, have received many representations, all of which have been carefully thought out and considered. And I don't want you to think that whatever happens tonight, and I can't necessarily predict what's going to happen tonight, that, you know, it's a waste of time making a representation. As Paul has said, there'll be a further opportunity of public meetings, and the exhibitions that will be held, and ultimately before the inspectors. So there's plenty of mileage yet to go in this long and arduous journey that Derbyshire Dales embarked on, and we seem to have been talking about local plans, both the one that was withdrawn and the current one, for quite a few years. And I've certainly had to chair and be present at a number of very difficult and painful meetings, because it's not an easy task, this, and I don't think any member here takes any pleasure whatsoever in having to make decisions that we know affect people's villages and towns and places of work and the rest of it. You know, we can't get away from it, but we have to acknowledge that we are obliged to find housing numbers. The inspector made it quite clear it had to be in the region of 6,400, and we've been trying to work to that end. And I'm grateful to Mr. Wilson for paying tribute to my colleagues on the Local Plan Advisory Committee, because we do seem to have met forever, sometimes twice in 1 week for an inordinately lengthy periods, and it is quite wearying, but they stuck at it, and like him, I'm grateful to everyone who's taken part in that process. Now, I'm well aware from the procedure outlined, Chairman, that there will be some sites, and they will be spoken about tonight, which will be, inverted commas, extracted, close inverted commas, from this main debate. So I'm not going to go on too long at this stage, merely to point out that I think it's only right and proper that we've found a device that allows individual ward members and others to make their views very clear about a particular site and whether they like it or don't like it. Not forgetting it that in the main, our main objective is to get a local plan moving forward that has sufficient numbers not to be rejected again. And I think we just got to remind ourselves what the consequences of that could be for everybody, and I mean everybody, because if we fail to get a local plan adopted this time round, there's every chance that government inspectors will take over the process, so that you can say goodbye to local democracy when that happens, whatever you think of us and whatever you think of the decisions we take. And also it will continue the sort of situation we found ourselves, and the Planning Committee Chairman knows this only too well, where opportunists have taken advantage of our lack of 5 years supply to money in their planning applications and win on appeal, and so it goes on. So if we don't get a plan together soon, all I can guarantee is even bigger trouble than the trouble you think we've all got now. And we have a legal duty and an obligation as a council, as elected members, to get plan through, listening carefully to what you say, but not denying you the opportunity of continuing to make your points. So, Chairman, I'm happy to move the recommendation, but I know from the procedure you've outlined there will be sites that are extracted from that and which will have a separate debate, which I'm sure will be very robust, and I'm sure members will respect your wish this to be an orderly and fair meeting. So I don't think I've said anything that upsets anybody just yet, Chairman, but I'll reserve the right to say that in a little while. I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Catt.
Thank you, Chairman. I echo every single word that has just been said by Councillor Rose, and reserving the right to speak later in the debate, I will second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Just for clarification, that is a proposal and a seconder for the main motion. I now move to the procedure of extraction.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's two sites I'd like to move for extraction. The first one is the land at Pinewood Road and Brixton Road, known to the residents as Schlar 224 and 225, but in the current paperwork as HC2V.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Burfoot Martin.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to second that proposal. Do you want reasons for that as well at this stage or not?
No.
Not at the moment, no.
Right,
We can
okay.
just park that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the second
Councillor
one
Stevens
is
again.
So this is your second one?
yeah,
Thank you.
land at Tansley House Gardens, again known to the residents as Schlar 467, but referred to in tonight's documents as HC2DD.
Second that, Chair.
Now that
Finds a seconder. If we could park that one now, so we have two on the table. Beg your pardon. Councillor Swindle, have you got a further one to extract?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I move that we extract land at Snitterton Fields, west of Border Quarry, South Darley.
I'll
second that, Chair.
And that's
Seconded by Councillor Susan Burfoot. So that's a third one for clarification. Is there a fourth? Councillor Jenkins.
Yes, I'd like to propose, and I don't know if I've got a seconder, but I'd like to propose HC2F, commonly known as the land of Throstlenest Way in Brailsford.
Does that find a seconder?
I'll second it, Chair, for the purpose of debate on that site.
Thank you, Councillor Swindle. For clarification, everyone, that is now 4 extractions from the teeth. Any further ones? Thank you very much, members. We would now return to the main debate. Okay. Who'd like to contribute to the main debate, which has been proposed, if you remember, by Councillor Rose and seconded by Councillor Catt? Councillor Sue Burfoot, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, are we doing general points now about the local planning itself? Yeah.
sorry.
Everything apart from the sites we've extracted. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm very well aware.
You could use the microphone for next door, please. Get it right next to you, please. Whichever one you.
I've got a loud voice. I'm very well aware what a difficult process the local plan has been for officers and members of the local plan advisory committee. In some respects, the whole process is a numbers game, forced upon the council by the government, resulting in huge pressure to allocate sites, even if unsuitable or undeliverable. The council's hands are somewhat tied, and I feel that only positive action by the government in some respects can resolve certain matters. For example, the effect of the national park and a commitment to brownfield sites before greenfield sites by way of incentives and/or legislation. We all know that the demand nationally for houses is great, but the demand varies from area to area, and yet the numbers foisted upon us have little regard to local conditions, for example, topography, which is particularly important in the Matlock area. It's obvious that many of the houses on sites proposed for allocation on brownfield sites as well as those which already have planning consent, such as Corder Quarry and Matlock, will never be built, whilst houses will be built on easier greenfield sites, easy pickings, if you like. When making decisions on this draft local plan, we're making decisions which may have huge impacts on communities for years to come. And as a council, we must question all the current proposed allocations and, if necessary, withdraw some sites, which is what obviously we are doing. But I think we should also find a way of including some of the previously rejected sites. And I could give an example of that one that I made it my business to visit, which was the one put forward by the Whitworth Trust, which would actually, in Darley Dale, which would actually be for huge community benefit and not just for the benefit of developers, and indeed search new sites. So I'll leave it at that at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's remiss of me, members, it's a maximum of 5 minutes per contribution, a maximum. You don't have to use it all. Councillor Martin Burford, please.
Thank you, Chair. Housing developers tend to seek out weaknesses in the planning system, while the government seems determined to undermine even more green fields. This appears to be without any concern or fears for the vast swathes of our countryside now under threat from predatory developers. Regrettably, ministers don't seem to have properly grasped the urgent need to fund the necessary but enormous costs of remediating brownfield sites. Surely the prospect of leaving our derelict former quarry and employment sites vacant and festering for years to come is bizarre in extreme. The only certainty is that these same developers intend to make enough money to ensure that they will never have to live in the sort of housing estates they're building or compensate existing residents for any collateral damage. Too many are trying to jump into the gap between council's local plans, knowing full well that land they are targeting is dear to local communities but temporarily lacking much protection. Unfortunately, some developers are not waiting for the protected local plan process to be concluded. They realise that some of their preferred sites are being opposed or are being rejected. So they are attempting to circumvent the system by submitting their plans now. This will effectively undermine the local plan deliberations, with many proposed and rejected sites determined by the council or by a government inspector long before the final plan is approved. This will have the effect of making tonight's decision something of a farce in my opinion, but by and large I do agree with nearly all the development policies before us. I also agree that we have no choice but to find the housing numbers demanded of us, but simply to satisfy a government inspector at an examination in public. But I disagree with some of the sites selected based on a fairly sound methodology, but with some inconsistent and anomalous assessment conclusions and the traffic light system applied quite loosely in some cases. I think the quota system adopted to ensure a so-called fair distribution of housing sites throughout the district is frankly crazy because it ignores the different topography and landscape character of the Derwent Valley, for instance, compared to the Southern Dales, as well as between different villages. I've already pointed out to fellow councillors on the Local Plan Advisory Committee a number of potential alternative sites for houses, including the excellent Whitworth Trust proposed in Darley-Dale, and most of them on brownfield land, and warn that if a certain site at the top of Matlock, Brixton Road, is allocated, it's unlikely that any houses will ever be built on our brownfield sites in Matlock, Corder Quarry and Halldale Quarry, unless there is a sudden injection of government help. Residents remain dumbfounded that these sites have remained derelict for so long. A further problem is that too many developers try to sidestep requirements to provide smaller, affordable homes, preferring detached houses instead, which occupy more land. Therefore, we need to ensure that more affordable houses are built, preferably accessible to town centre services and amenities, which Wolds Farm is not. In conclusion, I agree that the country needs more houses, so adherence to all protests would mean no houses will be built at all. Most reasonable people seem to understand that, but businesses, local authorities and communities have to find a way to coexist alongside each other. If there were proper consultation, proper attempts to listen, to compromise, to be sensitive, and to put people before profit, if developers and local councils can do that, then the public would try much harder to listen with respect, courtesy and a more open mind. It works both ways. So I ask fellow councillors tonight to reject this draft plan and to go back to the drawing board. I also have a number of questions, but I don't know when you want to take those, Chairman.
How many have you got?
There are 4 general questions.
If you can make them, you've got a minute to say them,
Oh,
please.
right, yeah. Well, first one is policy S4, development and defined settlement boundaries. Development should not appear as an intrusion into the countryside, so why have the boundary lines not been extended to include sites proposed for allocation? Secondly, policy S11, local infrastructure provision. New development will only be permitted where the necessary infrastructure is available or arrangements are in place to provide it within an agreed time frame. So it's the infrastructure levy, for instance. So do all sites proposed for allocation pass this test? The third one is policy HC1 and 2. I notice that the boundaries shown around the proposed sites are still arbitrary in some cases, as originally bid for, while others, for instance Pinewood and Gritstone and Snitterton Fields, have been adjusted to indicate the recommended limits for development, just as I have been requesting at previous local plan meetings. Why do we have this apparent anomaly? And lastly, HC17, accessibility and transport. How will we seek to ensure adherence to this policy, given the frequent need to acquire third-party land? And are there circumstances in which compulsory purchase powers can be used to acquire such land on behalf of private developers?
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to take a couple more speakers now before I ask the officers to answer the questions. We've got several on the table. Councillor Jenkins, please.
Very brief, Chair. My question, it's really a question, yeah. And it's to do with mitigation. Obviously, I understand the need for the local plan to come forward as quickly as is reasonable. However, it seems to me that, particularly with our neighbour, the Peak Park, it is not clear exactly how many houses they are going to end up with wanting to build. And in addition, it's not clear to me the mechanism that the outcome of the West Sussex mitigation with the neighbouring national park. If we pass this plan and we are allowed in tandem with Peak Park to mitigate some of the housing numbers, what is the mechanism that we can use post-plan to adopt that mitigation, should it come forward?
That's it.
Another question on the national park. Can I have Councillor Flitter, please, and I'll ask Paul to answer those questions. Councillor Flitter, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I agree with Councillor Rose in that this is a very difficult meeting in our calendar. And I'm fully aware of the consequences if we don't adopt this plan tonight. I'm fully aware of the work that's been taken on by various officers on the committee. But I still have very serious concerns because we'll be split as councillors. Those that are protected by the Peak Park will be able to look at this evening and they'll be able to look objectively and they'll be able to look at the Derbyshire Dales as a whole. Whereas we, in the areas that are affected and our ward members, we've got a very difficult task ahead because we have a moral duty as well as a legal duty to our residents, the people that elected us to sit here tonight and be part of this process. And I think that democracy should play its part, and the people that are concerned about certain aspects should be able to voice those opinions. The report itself does contain some well-worded policies, but like in local government, these policies can be interpreted in many ways, and that's where the confliction comes at planning committees and at meetings like this. When we look at the report itself, what we're asked to do tonight was to approve the contents. Well, you've changed a little tonight to what we should be doing, because that I could not do, because I do disagree with sites in Tansley and sites in Matlock.
So we can't talk about the specific ones.
I'm not talking about that, Chairman.
Right,
it's
okay.
part of the discussion.
Right.
What happens, I want to know later on, is if we later on take a site out, what happens? Because I'm aware that representations can be made later on in the process. So if I was to vote for this evening, then I could find myself with that site being put in at a later date, and yet I've still supported the whole document. And I do need that clarifying at some stage. The other thing is that we'll have a presentation of the outcome of any consultation to a future meeting. Consultation is fine, but what do we do after that consultation? That is still unclear to me, because we have the legal duties to provide a plan. So what is actually going to happen and how we're going to treat that? It also talks about the character and diversity of our countryside. It should be sustained, and there is a need to protect the local and natural beauty of the land around our towns and villages. Don't forget that that doesn't just mean in the remote areas of the countryside. We have some beautiful landscape on the edge of our towns and villages that need protecting from urban sprawl. So sites included really contravene some of the policies. Perhaps planners don't see it in that way, but clearly it does by some members and residents. We also talk about enhancing the townscape, protecting open space, which is important to settlements. But then on the other hand, we use words like significantly and demonstrably outweighing benefits. That overrides anything that's come before. In the spatial vision, we talk about strengthening our local rural economy. We talk about maintaining viability, protecting our environment, and offering a high quality of life. Some of these developments proposed, they do not offer a high quality of life to our present residents. And getting on to our larger villages, I think the point was borne out by a previous speaker. We go on to say that villages will benefit from development and improved range of amenities.
30 seconds, please.
Such as schools and healthcare. Can you please tell me where healthcare comes into the scheme? Because we now have to plan in Matlock 4 weeks ahead when we're going to be ill to make an appointment with our local doctors. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I ask Paul to answer those particular points? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think in order to respond to a number of questions that members have raised there, it might be beneficial if I almost go back to some of the basic principles which are undermining the preparation of this local plan, perhaps for the benefit of members of the public as well. Clearly, when we published a plan last time around, this council responded very positively to significant public representation in regard to the amount of housing which that plan proposed. And collectively, we took a conscious decision to put forward a plan which we knew was 2,000 dwellings less than we should actually be planning for. And the basis of that was because we wanted to safeguard the attractive environment of the Derbyshire Dales as much as was possible. We wanted to try and strike the right balance between achieving the amount of residential development needed to sustain some of our communities, but also to maintain what is attractive about the district at the same time. We got a very clear message back from the Secretary of State that whilst desirable, is not actually achievable in the context of the government's agenda for planning for future housing growth, not just in the Derbyshire Dales, but the whole of the country. We have, at a national policy level, a pro-growth housing agenda. And as much as we may dislike that, that is the fact of the matter. That is why there is such emphasis being placed upon accommodating the housing needs of the whole of the country, and in particular the Derbyshire Dales, in order to make sure that we provide enough houses for our communities, that we provide enough affordable houses for our communities, which is clearly a significant problem in our particular district. So, whilst I am very sympathetic, as indeed are a number of members of the Local Plan Advisory Committee, that we want to safeguard as many greenfields as possible, the simple fact of the matter is that we do not have enough brownfield sites to accommodate all of our housing requirements. So inevitably, very difficult decisions have to be considered in terms of the allocation of greenfield sites, and hence why we have some very difficult decisions before us this evening. Now, in terms of some of the specific questions that were asked, and particularly around Councillor Flitter's points regarding what happens after consultation, as I said at the start of the meeting, this is very much the start of the journey in terms of this local plan. The public consultation responses that the Council receives will have to be taken into account. They will be considered by a meeting of council, and amendments will be made to the plan as deemed appropriate. And in terms of what's deemed appropriate, it's amendments which will still maintain a sound plan. I'm not going to pretend that we can prepare a plan which is significantly short on its housing growth requirements and get that past the Secretary of State. We've tried that, we failed. I don't think it's in the interests of this council or indeed the residents of the district to try that again and fail for a second time. So we do need to make some difficult decisions, and we need to plan sensibly in order to try and make sure that we identify the right sites and that we stand the best chance of success. In terms of the policies that we have, yes, they do seek to protect what's best about the Derbyshire Dales, but in doing so, the allocations that we are having to consider have got to address an immediate requirement. You cannot sustain the existing settlement framework boundaries that we've had in the plan for the last 10 years or so without considering expansions onto greenfield sites. And we do have to plan for increasing the infrastructure requirements. And a lot of the development proposals which will come forward and the strategic policies which members have before them this evening identify what they are. Healthcare is clearly a key issue. We are in detailed discussions with the clinical commissioning groups. We know what their agenda is, and it doesn't automatically mean that there will be new GP practices, because that isn't the government's agenda either. The agenda in terms of healthcare provision is to broaden opening hours, broaden different ways of working, and adopt a much more regional approach to the delivery of healthcare, as opposed to providing additional GP facilities within individual settlements. That isn't what the programme of the health agenda is moving forward. So what we are challenged with trying to do is to secure the right amount of development in the right place and get the relevant benefits for the district at the same time. The issue of the Peak Park has been raised by a number of members, and it is extremely difficult for this district because half of our land area does reside within the national park. But there is a national policy of protection in place for national parks. Whilst the Peak District National Park Authority have their own policies which restrict development, there is a national position which says that development in national parks shall be restricted. We have had detailed discussions with the park to see whether their current forecast of delivering 400 homes can be increased, and there's a possibility that it may be increased, but it won't be increased significantly. And we certainly won't get as much development in the national parks such that we can see a significant reduction in the amount of development outside of the national park. And the National Park Authority have national policy behind them in defending that position. That's something this local plan cannot change, however unpalatable that may be. In terms of the issues raised by Councillor Burfoot, the point was made about developers jumping into the gap. Yes, that has happened, and we have seen developers seeking to exploit the fact that we don't have a local plan and come forward with planning applications which, even if we refuse, because of the lack of a local plan and because we're not identifying enough land for housing, they've succeeded on appeal. But you can rest assured, if you don't come forward with a local plan soon, that gap will get even bigger and you'll have more developers jumping into it. So there is a significant burden upon this authority to push forward with its local plan preparation as soon as possible in order to make sure that we are in control of the agenda rather than the development industry, or rather than the Secretary of State imposing a development plan on us if we don't prepare it within the timescale which we've outlined. I think, Chairman, I've probably dealt with most of the general issues.
I've got plenty of speakers. Councillor Swindle.
Thank you, Chair. And I apologise in advance. I didn't expect to make a point at this point in the meeting, so I have no notes or haven't written anything down. And you might be relieved to know I'm not going to go into detail about the actual local plan, but just make a couple of points about democracy. And just for the benefit of the public, I'm speaking as an independent member, but also with the experience of once being a member of a political group. Just to start inwards, I'd like to say congratulations or sort of well done to the local advisory group for getting this far. And that might not go down well with the public, but I'm not on that advisory committee. and I don't want to be on that advisory committee. It's a thankless job, and there's absolutely no way I'd like to be a part of it. I've even spoken against some of the sites against those councillors. I'd also like to say thank you to the Chair for allowing us to exclude sites tonight. I think that's made our job a little easier. And also to our planning team, which again may not be popular with the public, but our planning team being in place are far better than an imposed government team coming in and imposing these sites on us, which brings us to democracy. And I'm sure everybody's had enough of hearing what a difficult job this is for us councillors. It is. You know, we don't, I'm sure there isn't a councillor in this room that wants to build the houses that you don't want. If we had a choice, we wouldn't do it. I'm sure we wouldn't. And when I said I speak as an independent member, I've also been a part of a political group. And I know that when you're part of a political group, your leaders listen to you if you have a conscience, and they will take on board your concerns, particularly as ward members, as we are there to represent the people who elected us. I'd like to say, in the matter of democracy, well done and congratulations to all of the residents at the top of Matlock who have emailed in their droves. It's been pretty daunting and overwhelming, I won't lie. I've read as much of them as I can and in as finite detail, but I think you're to be congratulated on the excellent work you've done in getting in touch with us and letting us know your views. That is democracy, and I'm sure that everybody has taken a lot of what's been said on board. I represent South Darley, which Parish Councillor Tony Symes has just spoken on. I've received a lot of emails from South Darley residents, which I'm sure many of the other councillors haven't, so I've had a lot to read through. So that's the positive point. And I do like to always put something a little controversial into what I say, as many members will know. But today an email was sent to all councillors, and in my opinion I took an affront to it, and I found it quite rude. And that was from a resident at the top of Matlock who asked the question, are we here to serve our residents, or are we the other kind of councillor who is here for the fee, for the money? I know a lot of councillors here who personally, I don't know them all as well as I should, but I can guarantee you they aren't here doing this for the money. It's not a job that we love to do what we're doing tonight. We enjoy representing communities and doing the best that we can for you. Well, that kind of an email actually really does put an affront up to me.
It doesn't speak for the ordinary.
And I was going to just pop that in there, that I'm sure that resident doesn't speak for the rest, and pull down the excellent work that you've done. And I'll finish, Chair, saying we've got to do what we've got to do tonight, however it goes. The democracy goes further than the council chamber. We have elections. If you're not happy, you can always vote against the ward member if they don't do what you like. Or even better, you can take a leaf out of Sally Webster's book and stand for council yourself.
Councillor Mike Ratcliffe, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. A number of my colleagues tonight have touched upon some of the comments that I wanted to make, notably about the difficulty of the task that we have faced over the last few months, and indeed this evening. A colleague of mine on the planning committee last night made a humorous but very well-founded tribute to one of the planning officers there, saying how broad his shoulders were, and indeed they are, and so are all of ours in taking on board the criticisms that we sometimes have levied against us, and indeed trying to shoulder the burden of the responsibility that we're faced with. It's very easy to use a phrase that's being bandied about at the moment, to say that we're in a climate that is similar to the project Fear that's being used within the referendum debate. But there are some very real threats being posed by the government, describing or setting out the intentions that it would bring about. should the local plan not succeed, or indeed, even if it succeeds and the housing development stalls or isn't brought to fruition, the penalties that we would face are very real. So we do have to take all this on board. I would congratulate the speakers here this evening, even more so were this to be a planning committee, but of course it isn't that as such. What we're here for is very much for strategic purposes. I would like to thank too, incidentally, all those who sent numerous emails to me. Despite the fact that they clogged up my system, I did read every single one of them. But in the main, what they articulate are planning concerns, and it's that point that I'd just like to briefly touch on, if I may. Because the concerns that I have and will express about, for instance, the sites that have been put forward for exclusion or extraction are really to do with these objections planning on planning grounds. What I need to be satisfied that those objections and concerns are not significant enough to warrant exclusion. Because in the main, a lot of the sites that we're putting forward have a longer time scale and will be subject to mitigation measures that may well overcome them. What we have to be reassured about and have to accept is whether or not there is a practical viability about these sites, whether they are deliverable in real terms. If the case is that they are not, and there's a weight of evidence to say that they will not, in all likelihood, achieve development, then it's very right and proper for, amongst other reasons, why they should be excluded. But that's what I would wish to know before making a decision on them. Yeah, so that's...
Thank you very much. Moving on to Councillor Catt, please.
Several members have made reference to the work on the Local Plan Advisory Committee, and I would just like to emphasise that, and to emphasise just how much work has gone in to producing the report that is before Council this evening. We, as a committee, the Local Plan Advisory Committee, have met on 8 separate occasions. That is in addition to public meetings which have been held at Bakewell, at Matlock, Wirksworth and in Ashbourne. That's in addition to the updates given on numerous area forums across the district. And in those 8 meetings, our agenda pages have numbered 779. And I know, Martin, you've mentioned to me on several occasions the amount of time that has had to be spent preparing for those meetings, reading not only the papers sent out by way of agendas, but also the background papers that formed the basis of the reports that were prepared by the officers. Those 8 meetings lasted 13 hours. 13 hours of debate, 13 hours of questions, 13 hours of presentations. Every single one of those meetings was open to the public, and a total of 224 members of the public actually attended, and 30 spoke at those meetings. We made 33 site visits. All of the sites that are before you this evening are ones that we visited and then discussed in committee. The point I'm trying to make is that the paper that you've got before you wasn't just dreamed up very quickly. It was the sum total of an awful lot of work put in by officers and then presented to a committee of 12 for you to consider this evening. I have no hesitation in recommending it to you.
Thank you. Councillor Purdy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I support the motion, but I'd like to pick up on 3 points, if I may, and remind members and the public that this planning committee did its utmost to protect Asker Lane site and voted against this recommendation for approval, but subsequently, of course, that was overturned by a government inspector. So we're dealing here with policy, and as Councillor Ratcliffe pointed out, there's very different matters on planning. So I want you to divorce those 2 points. The second point, and I empathise completely with members of the public who have spoken eloquently tonight, and like other members, I've read everything that's come into my email box. And as a former road safety officer of Derbyshire Constabulary, I have every sympathy with the views on highway safety and the accidents that have occurred. But we are stymied by the fact that the opinion of the highways officers is that they have no objection to these sites, otherwise they would be extracted. So that's one block we're up against. So you really need for an highways officer to say objection to your site, and then you're home and dry. The third point, I have to take strong objection to what Councillor Martin Barefoot said. I think it's rich coming from Councillor Barefoot when he's a member of the local plan committee, and then he comes tonight that we should drop the plan and go back to the drawing board. Your party are actually calling for more houses to be built. So where would that leave us? We simply cannot go back to the drawing board. We've got no choice tonight but to get this policy through and get the numbers on the board. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Millwood.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say I agree with most of the speakers tonight in supporting this motion. I'll say to the speakers that we have a very difficult case to look at. 332 pages tonight, numerous amount of emails. We've all gone through what you're going through. I represent Ashbourne. I'm glad to say, in some respects, that most of the buildings have taken place in Ashbourne South, and I'm in Ashbourne North. But that doesn't stop 200 people sending me emails to say they're against it. One of the speakers said about housing types. It's something we're addressing in the plan, especially in policy HC11, where it says about elderly needs accommodation. And we've already approved sites where there's going to be anything up to 16 bungalows on that site. As Councillor Purdy has said, our hands are tied when it comes to a lot of the applications, because that the highways officer said everything's all right. We know it's not all right, but we have to take their recommendation to put it forward. I'm glad to see in Ashbourne that we're safeguarding historic events like throat tide, etc. And I do mark on the very difficult decisions we're having to make as far as Peak National Park. I think if they, for the size of the park, if they'd add their true amount of houses in there, then our task would have been a lot different. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chairman. I sat on the Local Plan Advisory Committee, and we've been out to see all the sites within the recommendation tonight. There is quite a challenge that government has set us all, both to arrive at a figure of objectively assessed need, but also to find sites that are going to be developed in the timescale, and those that are available. And and presumably with, and also with landowners who are prepared to develop them as well. So it's a big challenge that we're faced. There are things, I think, in the plan that we might object to. My ward covers is Bradley, and that has a lot of the Ashbourne development in it, or the Ashbourne airfield development. That is a very serious issue. The problem I've got is that if we don't deliver development on Ashbourne airfield, where are we going to find the land to put the replacement development? And that's the real issue. And I think if we lose sites from this process, we're going to run into serious problems that we had whenever it was 18 months ago when the last plan didn't succeed. If we're going to object to sites, we need to come up with proposals of other sites. And I think that as we move from now through the consultation period, everyone will have the opportunity to say more about where they might want to see development, and those who own land will probably come forward with other sites. But we can't fall short of what we're supposed to deliver.
I've got
No more speakers on the table, no further comments from members. I'd like to ask Councillor Rose to sum up.
Chair, just a point of order before you go on.
Thank you.
Can you just explain to me, please, the philosophy behind voting for this issue tonight before we've discussed the exclusion of sites? Because that will affect the way that I vote.
This is so we can get the motion on the table and voted for, and then we can exclude, as set out in the notes, each site that has been proposed and seconded for extraction. There's a lot of debate about this, about how we could do this fairly to everyone and to be fair to all the sites, and I think this is the best solution we came up with. Or else we could debate every single site and we'd be here until Christmas. Councillor Rose.
Well, further to that, I hope Councillor Fitter can support this, along with other members, as we have extracted from the motion that's about to be put to the vote those sites, and we'll come back to those in a minute. So I hope he feels reassured, and then, depending on whether they're successful or fail, we can either add them back into the plan or take them out and look for other sites. But just briefly, Chairman, it was very easy for me as leader of the council to blame the government, and I'm not averse to doing so. I'm on record of criticising Brandon Lewis for, Section 106 agreements and whittling about other things and the lack of finance, and I could go on all night about that, but I won't. It'd be easy to blame the Peak Park for doing nothing or seemingly doing nothing. But my answer to that is we've got to work with the government, we've got to abide by the rules, and I think members understand that. And with the Peak Park, I think they do appreciate our dilemma. They are working on it with us, and I hope that process will continue. And partly in answer to Angus's question, I'm sure we will do all we can to take advantage of whatever's going in that direction. And I think it's best to work with people than criticise them. So I hope we can agree to the easy part of this meeting before we move on to the hard part.
Thank you very much. Just before we go to the vote, members, I'm just going to ask Sandra just to reiterate the rules of engagement tonight.
Thank you, Chairman. It just might be helpful if we just refresh members' memory of what you are asked now to vote upon. What has been moved is the officer recommendation set out on page 3 of the report. The Council approves the contents of the Derbyshire Dales draft local plan as set out in appendices 1 and 2 to this report, with the exception of the 4 sites that have been extracted so far. So you are not being asked at this moment in time to vote in regard to HC2B, Pinewood Road, HC2DD, Tansley House Gardens, the Snitterton site, and Throstle Nest Way, Brailsford. They are not included in this proposition. So provided you're in favour or against, as it may be with the other elements of the Derbyshire Dales draft local plan, that's what you now need to focus your mind upon and act accordingly with the show of hands. And just to remind Councillor Millwood at this point, if I may, you may wish to express your abstention at the end of the day on the particular application in which you have an interest.
So it's been proposed and seconded. I'm going to put it to the vote now. All those in favour, please. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions?
That's 3. So that's 25 votes in favour, none against, with 3 abstentions.
So that,
Chair had already noted the abstention.
thank you very much. So that is carried.